Now, I am not a gun collector per se, and I don't tend to gravitate to classic firearms. I like modern technology and all the latest gizmos and gadgets, and I have limited space in my gun safes, so I don't just buy stuff for the sake of owning it. But I do like building guns. And the one that we're going to talk about today was inspired in part by the 2012 movie Act of Valor. Act of Valor was an action film about a terrorist that gets stopped by some Navy SEALs. What set this one apart from a lot of the other movies is that half the cast were active duty Navy SEALs. The movie got panned critically, as if I give a shit about their opinion. Mostly because real active duty Navy SEALs can't act. But the action sequences were pretty badass. I personally like the movie. Now, the majority of the characters in the film are using some variation of the Colt M4A1. And this got me reminded of several of the books that I've read over the years written by former SOCOM guys. Books like Delta Force by Charlie A. Beckwith, Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell, The Operator by Robert O'Neill, which is a great book, by the way, The Last Punisher by Kevin Lech, Fearless by Eric Blam, that's another great read, and Thank You for My Service by Matt Best, fantastic book, and quite a few more. Point is, unless you're talking about Delta Force or DevGru, with all the kinds of fancy, high-speed, low-drag nonsense commercially available today, the guys that do the real work keep it relatively simple. So when I decided it was time to tinker with an AR build, I wanted to model it to have the form and function of the M4A1s fielded by the military. But I didn't want to spend a fortune getting there. So this ain't a clone build. This is my M4A1 style build. So we're going to cover all the bits and pieces that went into this one here. And to do that, we're going to go ass to mouth, because that's how I roll. Starting on the ass end, we've got the B5 Systems Bravo stock. These go for about $58. Normally I run Magpul CTR stocks, but this one looked a little bit more like an M4A1 stock, and I like the feel of it a lot. Has a great cheek weld, and doesn't wobble around too badly on the receiver extension. The lower receiver that I went with is an Aero Precision. It is not a Colt. Why? Because I didn't feel like using a whole mortgage payment to buy a lower receiver. I find Aero lowers to be well made and have the requisite features. Now, prices on all lower receivers have gotten stupid lately, but at the time I only paid about $45 or $50 for this one. I built out the rest using a CMMG parts kit, including the fire control group. Now, I will point out that this gun goes against all my philosophizing, as nothing about this gun is fully ambidextrous, except for maybe the trigger. I did this on purpose, keeping with the simple as a douchebag philosophy. The trigger is mil-spec and single stage. I have an extra ALG trigger that I could have thrown in there, but again, I wanted to keep this one basic. Now, I did cheat a little bit with the trigger guard. This here is a Magpul enhanced polymer trigger guard. I didn't even want to use it, but I tried 4 different regular trigger guards and they all rattled around on me. So I guess my Aero Precision receiver is slightly out of spec. Either way, this little enhancement is modest, and it will come in handy during those douchey winters that I have to endure around here. I kept the standard A2 pistol grip on here because I have about a dozen of them floating around in spare boxes that I've pulled off of various rifle builds and over the years. And I didn't feel like buying another grip. Now, the upper receiver started its life as a BCM blemished upper. These used to be pretty reasonably priced for about $90 or so, and it comes with the forward assist and the dust cover. You do have to generally install them because they'll come in little baggies, and so I've mashed up the receiver a little bit trying to get those bits on there. They call it a blem, which I could almost never detect the blemishes. It is T-marked on the 1913 rail, and sometimes they got a little divot or something like that on the forward assist or some kind of marking, scratch or whatever. but I'm going to scratch them all up anyway when I get them, so it doesn't bother me none. Now we get into the guts of the gun. It gets a little bit more fancy. The buffer assembly came as a kit from Geisley. Comes with the tube, receiver extension, castle nut, retaining plate, an H1 buffer, and his coiled spring. It's a really nice setup, but it's also $100. It's way more than you need to spend on all these parts, but I bought it for something, ended up using it for this. I ain't gonna complain too much. The bolt and carrier are also a little bit of Geisley. It's actually branded as ALG Defense. Now, you can't seem to find these on their website anymore, so I don't even know if they make them, and it's possible that this was actually a Geisley bolt carrier that was just a kind of a reject for whatever reason, and so they just labeled it with the ALG. Either way, this thing has all the features that you're looking for. It's an M16 profile, 93 10-shot peened, high-pressure tested, magnetic particle inspected, with a 4130 gas key that's properly staked. It's got all the chrome lining and all that. Essentially, it's just as nice as a BCM carrier, which would be my normal go-to. But since you can't find them anymore, I'll just be going back to the BCMs. The charging handle is a BCM gunfighter. It's one of those with the enhanced latch. Not too shabby. Not exactly authentic, but I had it lying around. Okay, so back up top we get a little fancy. The rear iron sight is a Ma-Tech AR-15 USGI backup iron. It's adjustable for windage and has a ranged turret on the side here. All kinds of fancy. This is an authentic part of this build and runs anywhere from $110 to $130 depending on where you buy it. Not a cheap piece of kit by any means, but it does add that cool factor. Pretty lame though, given that it's a backup sight and I'm never going to deploy it unless my EOTech battery dies. So we'll talk about that. Here we have an EOTech 552. This one is old school. Runs on 2 AA batteries and is night vision compatible. Bought this one on eBay trying to save myself a couple of bucks because they run about $560 normally, which is ridiculous considering I could have gotten an EXPS3 for about $100 more. But that wouldn't have matched the look I was going for. So, sometimes being stupid gets expensive. So to make up for spending so much on the optic, I went cheap again on the rail. This here is a Midwest Industries quad rail. Fitment and lockup is great, and it's lightweight for what it is. So I actually like it quite a bit. I got a Troy battle grip on the bottom. This has been floating around in my spare parts bin for years. It's aluminum and heavier than I needed for a vertical grip to be, so I kept swapping it out for polymer ones. But it is right at home on this build. Now, the rest of the stuff is stupid expensive. On top, we have a D-Ball I2. So this one has a visible green laser and an IR laser and illuminator. The illuminator ain't great, but I got the Surefire to fix that. And the D-Ball runs north of $700. And I probably picked this one up on the Devore during a sale, which means I paid just north of $700 and got it about 3 to 4 months later. On the side, I got a Surefire M612V IR Scout. Now, this has both an IR and a white light ability, and the IR illumination is very nice. Now, these can be found on Amazon, running about $550. I have both the D-Ball and the Surefire running over to a DS-SR07DIT switch, which is a confusing as hell way of saying it's a tape switch with 2 buttons, so I can operate the 2 independently. Now, for the laser, it can go with a constant on or a momentary on. Constant on just by double tapping. And the light is momentary on only. Finally, the barrel itself is a 14.5-inch chrome-lined barrel with a carbine length gas system. It's got an F-marked front fixed sight gas block and a bayonet lug. Not that I own a bayonet. The Birdcage style muzzle brake is pinned and welded in place to give it an overall length of 16 inches. Now, this was a little cheat to avoid another tax stamp. That said, I do have a BCM 14.5 inch upper that is cold hammer forged and chrome lined and has a normal A2 birdcage on it. It's currently on a pistol build, and I'll show you that one in a future video. I bought it to put on this, but I just could not bring myself to pin and weld a muzzle device onto such a great barrel. So this is a slightly cheaper barrel. So how does it shoot? Well, it shoots just fine. In full transparency, I built this at the height of the pandemic, so I haven't shot it a lot because ammo's hard to replace. But I have shot it, and I have sort of zeroed the optic, and it's exactly what I would have hoped it would be. It's a little overgassed, which is fine by me since I won't be mounting a silencer to it. And the Geisley buffer system keeps it from bouncing around too much. It's a no-frills rifle in terms of function. But I decorated it with some expensive-ass accessories for that tactical factor. And unlike some of the Star Wars guns that I may show off here, you don't have to talk about things like magazine compatibility. Any mag works just fine. Got a Gen 2P mag, USGI mags, they go right in the little feedy hole. And if you're so inclined and douchey to be using these drums, they click in there too. I ain't a fan. You might have picked up on that by now. And if anything breaks, you can find spare parts. And you don't have to mortgage your soul or sell off your firstborn or sell a bunch of blood and semen in order to buy the replacement parts. There's something to be said for having a simple, reliable rifle that goes bang when you pull the trigger and is capable of dropping freedom seeds within an inch or two of where you need it to go. So that's about all I got to say about this M4A1 style build. I'd like to ask you to go check out Dooshbag's brother Dick if you want to hear the drunken ramblings of an old man. Thank you for watching, and remember, I don't know who you are out there, but I got a gun.
Tangled in a web, I'm already dead. Might as well just give